We all know that COVID-19 has taken a steep toll on social protections and jobs, to say the least. The International Labor Organization expects global unemployment to stand at 205 million in 2022, and social protection benefits are not reaching more than half the global population. So, what investments do we need to catalyze an inclusive recovery with people at the center? Here to tackle that big question is ILO Director-General Guy Ryder, alongside Solvers podcast co-host Guhei Mora. And before I turn it over, don't forget to join the conversation and ask us your questions using hashtag SDG Action Zone 2021 and hashtag For People for Planet. We may feature your question later today in our Ask Away session. Now, here are Guy and Guhei.
Mr. Ryder, it's so exciting to be in conversation with you today. I'm happy to kick us off. So we know that the pandemic has exposed and in a lot of ways further entrenched the inequalities that existed in our pre-pandemic world. And I'm thinking here particularly about young people and women, especially when we look at the world of work. What do you think it will take as we look towards economic recovery to move us to a more just and equitable future, knowing how systemic inequalities the world over have left some of our most marginalized populations even further behind?
Well, great. Thanks for the question. And it's great to be part of this conversation with you. And let me pick up on your question. I mean, what I think this pandemic has revealed, it's been an extraordinary experience over the last year and a half. But I want to pick up what you said. It's revealed, above all else, I think, the extraordinary inequalities. And they're not just inequalities of degree. They're inequalities of a structural nature, which separate different parts of our societies. So some people have been able to have, this might sound like an inappropriate phrase, a relatively comfortable pandemic. So, from a world of work perspective, if you can take your computer home with you, sit in a comfortable house with a garden, continue your work, get your income, get vaccinated, the pandemic's been hard going, it's been inconvenient, but it's not been the same experience whatsoever as that majority of the world population, which has had to struggle on, sometimes had to continue to work as they always have done, notwithstanding the risk to their health and their well-being, because they have no alternative source of income. I think of that 60% of the world population that lives and works in conditions of informality. So, without emphasizing the point further, this pandemic has been like an X-ray of our societies. And what does the X-ray show? Real structural injustices and inequalities. Now, it sounds like a bad story. It is a bad story, but what might we take from it? Well, it might just, I think, be a wake-up call. It might just say, look, we have situations in the world, and many of them come from the world of work, by the way, which are intolerable, unsustainable, unacceptable by any measure. And this pandemic has shown us, A, what the costs of all of those failings are, but it may have shown us something positive as well. It's shown that maybe things can be done differently, that in situations of extreme emergency, we can rethink our policy settings and do better. And I think this is the opportunity that we now have. If I think of the 2030 agenda and the SDGs, well, we knew before the pandemic struck that we were well off track. We were well behind doing what we needed to do to get to the goals in 2030. And I think that the pandemic is not simply an incitement to accelerate and do better. It's basically a discontinuity. We have to put aside what we were doing before and do something very much more important and much more effective. And that does go to your question. We are arguing in our organization for a human-centered recovery from this crisis, which can put us on an entirely new trajectory. That speaks to the SDGs, it speaks to the experience of the last year and a half, and we can perhaps unpack what's behind that headline idea.
Absolutely. I know I'm really excited about some of the decisions that especially young people on the continent of Africa have had to make because of what the pandemic has done to the economy. but it's also forced a lot of people to think differently about what work looks like. I'd love to hear from you about whether you are seeing any opportunities that the pandemic has presented to really leapfrog development towards the SDGs, so that maybe we needed this type of interruption. Is there anything that you're particularly excited about that you're seeing come through in the world of work?
Yeah, there are some exciting things and some very worrying things. Starting on the worrying side, and you've mentioned the situation of youth, and in Africa, I can think particularly of some of the specifics of that. But unsurprisingly, but nevertheless very tragically, young people have been the particular victims of the economic and social impact of this pandemic, along with women, along with migrant workers. I guess there's nothing surprising about that, but that is a reality. Young people have lost their jobs, they've lost their educational opportunities and processes, so we really do have to focus upon them. On the positive side, what did we see when the emergency really hit around the world? We saw governments scrambling to take a series of ad hoc measures to protect people. Two numbers, I don't want to weigh us down with numbers. Governments introduced ad hoc social protection measures that brought under social protection coverage no less than 645 million people around the world. They had to do this. It was almost a survival reflex, but it shows what can be done if we think differently and act differently. The second point, is what has been the spend, the aggregate stimulus, the aggregate investment in people over the last 18 months because of the pandemic? It's been around 16 trillion US dollars. It's an extraordinary figure. You know, if we'd have said we need that money to do all sorts of worthy things in the past, we would have been told absolutely impossible, out of the question. Well, that money has been spent. And I think it shows us that where the need is present and is acknowledged by decision makers, there are resources available for investment. So I think the challenge of the future is to say, look, in this recovery process now, we have to focus upon and direct resources to the obvious needs that the world now faces. Now, unfortunately, the list of needs is long, isn't it? Climate change finance, care finance and health system finance, much else. I want to just perhaps put the spotlight on social protection finance, because one thing this pandemic has shown us is that where people have no type of social protection, and unfortunately that is the case for the majority of the people in the world, a social and economic crisis, of which we've just experienced the impact, rapidly becomes a humanitarian crisis. It becomes a crisis of survival. So I think the world simply cannot any longer fail to invest in the basics of social protection. We keep talking about making our societies more resilient in the face of external shocks. You know, in the social world, social protection is what resilience means. It gives people the wherewithal to stand up to crises, to get through them, and to come out ahead. So that's one piece of the story. I think the other piece of the story is all about inequality. And the one thing that really worries me is that on a current trajectory, the inequalities that were already very apparent in the world of work and in the world in general, they run the risk of getting worse. There are a number of factors at play, I think, which could make a very, very bad situation worse still.
So I know that for a lot of the world, the narrative has really been, once we have a vaccine, then we go back to normal. And that's just not proved to be true. There's incredible, again, inequality in how the vaccine is being distributed. And that's allowing so many of these variants to come out of various parts of the world. So as you are talking to the audience who would be watching this, what would your advice for those employers be who are really trying to move back towards what our pre-pandemic world or normal?
Yeah, look, I really do think that vaccines are a key to a return to, I wonder if we can call it normal, because I suspect there's a new normal waiting for us that will be different from our old normal. But a vaccine is a key. And as you've said so clearly, you've really hit the nail on the head here. the problem we face is that the unequal rollout of vaccines at the moment means that we are going into, on current trajectories, an unequal recovery process. So quite contrary, for example, to the crisis of 2008, 2009, from the financial meltdown on Wall Street, it's the advanced world, it is the rich world, if I can simplify, which is bouncing back quicker. Why? Because they have access to vaccines, and because they have the fiscal space, the fiscal firepower to invest in their economies on the necessary scale. The developing world, and I'm slightly simplifying here, has a cumulative disadvantage: insufficient vaccines, insufficient financial space. So rich world growing quickly, developing world less so. And this is where I think the seeds of even greater inequality lie, unless we take countervailing action. So vaccine justice, I think, is not just a health imperative, it's an economic and social imperative. I think it's absolutely necessary that the international community come to grips with that, and there are major efforts being made. But at the same time, the more general fiscal financial space available, the dangers of a looming debt crisis and debt stress have equally to be addressed in the broader space. Yes, this is a health emergency, but it's much more than that. It's an economic and social emergency as well.
And it sounds like we really do run the risk of just further entrenching those inequalities. I think pre-pandemic, we could have predicted that this is how vaccine rollout would happen because of the ways our world prioritizes capital over all else. And I guess we've talked a lot about the inequalities, but as you look across the world, across the work that the ILO is doing, what keeps you hopeful or even makes you excited about what's to come when we think about what the future of work might look like?
Yeah, you know, before the pandemic hit, we celebrated it was sort of an accident of the calendar. We had our centenary in 2019, and we talked about the future of work. We talked about the extraordinary changes taking place in the world of work. Think about digitalization, think about demographic changes, think about everything we have to do to counter climate change. And we were trying to pick out the opportunities, the transformative opportunities from that. And they're real, they are real. Digitalization properly applied can enrich working life. It can include groups who haven't found their place sufficiently in the world of work. But there is a major task of making technology work for people rather than the reverse. It's a great slogan, of course. It's a much more complicated thing to do. And then we have to turn the fight against climate change really on its head, not something which is going to destroy development opportunities or is going to reduce the quantity and quality of work, but a whole new green agenda of green jobs, which can actually make the world of work a richer place to be. And what I find really exciting is I think the generations who are primarily concerned by these transformative changes are the ones who are best equipped because of digital skills, because of their mindsets, but also most willing to embrace this notion of transformative change and to make of it an agenda for greater social justice, greater equality. So I see a coming together of needs, all of these challenges we must face up to, and a real willingness, particularly in the younger generations, to make it happen. They have the most invested in it, and I think they have the most to offer. The challenge then, of course, is whether we can get the politics together and whether we can get the international community at a time of, let's be honest, enormous tensions in the world, geopolitical tensions. If we can get them to come together and to sort of keep up with where the younger generations tell us they want our societies to go. But that's an exciting dynamic. It's probably a very uncertain dynamic, but there's a lot to be excited and a lot to be, I think, optimistic about.
So as we look to the future, hopefully with a bit of excitement, what would your call to action be for that international community who might be tuning in today?
Well, I think, and we'll have opportunities in the international calendar, we have to use this emergence from the trauma of the pandemic to set ourselves on this new trajectory. We call it at the ILO the need for a human-centered recovery. It's a simple idea, but I think it captures the challenges. We need to reconstruct our global economy in ways which does deliver what people really want. And I think people do want greater equity in their working lives, in their social lives. They want more equal educational opportunities for young people. They want to take seriously, and my goodness, recent experience only accentuates that, the fight against climate change. And I think they are quite intolerant of the excuses, the obstacles, and the divisions that have basically kept us from making better progress so far. The United Nations is the right place, of course, to make all of this happen. All of our organizations bear responsibilities within that overall responsibility. And I think the work that our organization is doing, and the focus on the world of work, because in the end, if you get the world of work right, a lot of the results that we're seeking are generated in the world of work, the way we produce, the way we consume. So it's a great place for getting things right. It's also the place where if things go wrong, wider society is going to suffer the consequences as well. So there's a lot playing out in the world of work, I would argue.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Mr. Ryder. This has been really fascinating, and hopefully we can look towards the future, this very uncertain future, with a bit of excitement, but also with strategy and inviting, voices that haven't been included in the past in some of the conversations on what the future of our world looks like. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.